Hi everyone, I'm Josh and welcome back again for day 5 of Vlogmas. This has been a lot of fun and today I wanted to take it a bit easier and give you my top favorite covers of the year. This is not top 10 covers that have been released in 2022, rather the top 10 covers of the books that I've read up to this point. This is meant to be sort of like just, a little bit of fun. There's not much to covers, but I am going to take some time, of course, to break down what the covers are telling us about the story, or if I can at all. I mean, I'm going to try to, but I'm not making any promises about my ability to really interpret what the covers are trying to tell us. So I have here my top 10 favorite covers ranked from least favorite to most favorite. They're not all necessarily my favorite because of the beauty. Some of it's just how it portrays what's there. But generally speaking, it's about the artistic presentation of the cover that I'm looking at. So the first one I want to highlight here is called Sailing to Byzantium. And this was a novella that I really enjoyed, and it was one that I read for my Westworld reading vlog. And it basically had to do with a far future that recreated ancient civilizations, kind of like theme parks. And it was much in the same vein as Westworld. It was interesting because what we're doing is this recreation is we're following this one character who seems to be sort of planted from his time into the present in this new world, this future world where he's in this not quite right, or he's not entirely sure if it's quite right, recreation of his time, which I think might have been New York or something. Then he goes on his journey with this woman who is in the world that he sort of gets connected to. As a story, it was really good. But I guess what you're seeing here in this cover, I like the design. I think it looks cool. It is, of course, kind of retro. I don't love retro covers, but getting past that, I think I love the art. I guess the way it all blends, the range of sort of pink and yellow and purple. It's just visually satisfying. That's really why I picked this one. As what it's telling us, honestly, I don't think this is very informative about the actual book. Like, I didn't picture my characters dressed like this, but then maybe he describes them like that. I just don't remember. Next up is going to be The Fisherman. And this is one I was unsure about putting on here. Same with the last one, but I wanted to run it out as a nice 10, which is why these first two are one of the best picks. But I'm setting it up for the really good ones, of course, towards the end. But this one, I think, did a really good job of conveying the tone of this book, which is a horror Lovecraftian novel, which I've talked about in my vlogmas videos already. But effectively, it's about a man whose wife died, and Lovecraftian shit happens. It has to do with basically when she dies, he goes sailing, and he just sort of learns to cope that way. I don't remember it ever being like a huge storm, but I know it's dark and it's like on a lake or something, and that sort of is all embodied here. In my opinion, it seems like they're taking some artistic leeway here. Nevertheless, still a really nice cover. Next up, we have 30 Days of Night, and this is one that it's just really pleasing to look at. It's almost angelic in what we're looking at. So there's this giant bird with giant bird's wing, a range of different colors, and honestly, when I look at it, I think of angel wings. And I think I can finally see some symbolic nature to the covers that we're looking at now, because in this one, it follows this young trans man who is reckoning with the death of his mom from I think 5 years ago, and part of that reckoning is this journey to try and find this bird, this mystical bird, or at least elusively unidentified bird species that his mom supposedly spotted before she died. It may have in fact led to her death in some capacity. And he's just sort of trying to hunt proof that this bird actually exists. So in that sense, it sort of makes sense that we have this feathery wing, like a bird, but also the angel wings almost for the spirit of his mom, which is sort of embodied in the story. And next up, you made a full depth of your beauty. And this was one I really was unsure where to put. The color orange, not my favorite. I don't love orange, but yet on this cover, this sort of bright orange with just the sliver of this beautiful woman's face is just so satisfying. Such a gorgeous cover. And if I had the book, it would show you, because that bright orange is just so vivid and it's just so nice to look at. What are we seeing here? Let's see, this is a love story about a woman who is just sort of trying to find someone to love and sort of staying this guy, then goes to his home and meets this guy's family. And while there, a range of unique circumstances takes place, and it's very dirty. Not like dirty like sexually, but like it's a very messy is the word I'm looking for, not dirty. Like it's a very messy story. It does not go in directions that are necessarily kosher, I guess is the best way to put it. Like people had problems with the direction it went. I think it was an interesting analysis of those types of relationships that exist in real life. And for me, I really liked it for that, but also just a really gorgeous cover. Next up is Square Cubed. This is one I was hesitant to put on here at first because while I absolutely adore this cover, it's not necessarily aesthetically pleasing. I loved it because I felt like it really embodied the story. Like I talk about in my horror wrap-up, my horror ranking video, a rift opens up not a rift, but there's a rip in space-time that causes these monsters to come through. And in addition to that, it sort of creates alterations in the laws of physics that then ripples out into a more complicated story. It's a novella, it's very fast-paced. It centers around this one girl and how she gets split from her sister during the time of the quote-unquote incursion. And for me, I see this and I think it just does for me, it was what really drew me in. Like you see this picture, you have this sort of barrier, this human figure there, and it really encompasses what's happening here. We have this central young girl who ends up going to be a scientist and a doctor in the story, who sort of is investigating this rift, and she's separated from her sister and surrounded by all these monsters. And it's just the perfect embodiment of what's there. I think it looks really cool. As someone who loved the book and who loved the premise, I think it's just the perfect embodiment of this almost nonsensical premise. Like the story, it's so hard to visualize, and to bring it to fruition in such a way, I think was really satisfying to see. Next up, we have How Far the Light Reaches, which was a memoir I read in December this month. And while the book itself was just okay, the cover really pulled me in. It was probably why I requested in the first place. I did think it was about sea creatures, and it's not really. It's a memoir. But as a cover, I loved the way in which sort of used light in a sort of a artistic manner, intertwined with this one large sea creature. It intrigued me. It's obviously aesthetically pleasing, and it intrigued me enough to want to pick it up. Next up, we have The Devours. This is by Andrew Doss. I've talked about this in multiple videos, even in vlogmas, and a queer werewolf sort of story that's sort of not a retelling, but similar to the Anne Rice story. And what does this cover embody the story? I don't know if it does. It does happen. It's heavily in the wilderness because it's following this sort of wolf-centered in the wild, so it makes sense that you were surrounded by this beautiful foliage. This woman, without spoiling it, I know who she is. It's pretty obvious who she is, but it's not really about her. Her story is an essential part of the story of what's going on for us to understand our main character, that is our main werewolf character, who's sort of communicating his life story. And it's intriguing in retrospect. I don't know if that's what I would expected on the cover, given that it's not what the idea I would have had, but I can see how it comes together. She's a central figure that plays a significant role in the main character's life. And I think one thing I really love about this cover is that because it's so beautiful, I think it goes really hand in hand with the beautiful writing. This horror book, it's just amazing how, I don't want to just keep saying beautiful, but the writing was beautiful. And to see this sort of dark and not sadistic, but just dark and monstrous world brought to life in a way that just felt so beautiful to imagine, this cover feels like the perfect companion to the writing of the story. Next up, another one that I read in December, Self-Portrait with Nothing. And this was a story about a girl who was adopted by two mothers, and it's about her learning who her biological mother is. And there's this idea that her biological mother actually, her paintings basically would bring people in or somehow connected to other parallel universes. And it's a sort of a mystery, I don't want to say thriller, but there's a thrilling aspect to it, to the journey that's going on. Because there's this thing that's happening. Why is her mother missing? Why is she presumed dead? And is she still dead? And is our main character at risk? And on top of all that, of course, is the multiverse really real? Self-Portrait with Nothing is an allusion to the title of one of the paintings of her mother's work. Ooh, I don't want to spoil the revelation, so I'm not going to, but I'll say it definitely fits. That painting feels like because of who we're following, this young girl, this daughter, I think it's the perfect embodiment of the sort of relationship she has with her mother, on top of playing a central role in the plot itself. So it really fit. Is this the painting? Based off how the painting is described, this doesn't seem like it is. I don't know if this is her mother's face or her face, but I like how it's made into a sort of a painting-esque artistic representation, because of course we're dealing with paint, we're dealing with art, and the book itself is about a portrait of the same title. Part of me wonders if this would be more compelling if you included, like if the cover was a reimagining or an imagining of what the painting actually looked like. I don't know, it might have spoiled it. I don't know, it's hard to say, but it's still one of the most gorgeous ones I looked at. We're getting the top 3 here, and this one, it could have been in the first place, honestly, depending on how I was feeling in the day. Next up, a book I didn't really like. I talked about this already in my horror. Why is there a giant alarm going outside? Anyways, I'm just gonna ignore it. My horror ranking video, The Night Ocean. This cover really, it pulled me in. This was the first Lovecraft book I read in October, and I wanted to read several. And it was because the cover was just fucking gorgeous. Let's be honest. This sort of weird, abstract, what in the world? It's construction. Okay, this abstract embodiment of what's going on. And it's interesting because all the Lovecraft stories I've read, even one I'm currently reading called Occultation of the Stories, there's a lot of Lovecraft stories that seem to have to do with, I'm trying to say, seeing the ghost of someone that's dead, and except not really a ghost. I mean, it's not really them. It's this creature. It's a part of the Lovecraftian mythos. I don't know which story that stems from, but a lot of them seem to be coming from that. And I think that's sort of pulling into here. Same with The Night Ocean had to do with finding a dead wife in the water. And this feels like that, but this isn't. Is it horror? Maybe. Is it fantasy? No, it's a historical fiction. I don't like the book. As sort of a way of embodying Lovecraft ideas, I did really enjoy this just weird abstract approach to the story. Even if it's not the most aesthetically pleasing, it's just kind of mesmerizing, almost like hypnotic. And then finally, the top cover of the year for me was Gods of Want, a book I haven't talked much about on my channel. This was a short story collection, and I don't think there were any essays, it's just short stories, and I really liked them. I think they were a sort of a collection of different stories that she had written at different points in time, all into one collection. So as a whole, I don't think it's necessarily my favorite, but I remember starting the first set of collections, the first stories, which had to do with mothers, and I personally, it resonated with me on a strong way. And it's not as if it was necessarily a mirror type story. A lot of them were windows into her life, her perspective as an Asian American, and I think also as a queer woman. It was fascinating. It was a fascinating set of stories, and it's weird. It's weird fiction and like a weird abstract approach. And if you were to read it, like it would almost seem nonsensical, but it's clearly intended to be that way. But with deliberate purpose. He's definitely trying to communicate something, just in a non-direct manner, and I really, really enjoyed it. Like I said, the themes of the stories as they evolved in the collection didn't quite work with me, but I think it just really worked. I really love this author's writing style, and I will be picking up other work she writes for sure, because I'm excited to see some full-length fiction from her, or long-form fiction rather. As far as the cover goes, I really don't know how to interpret this. Like, it's such an abstract, like almost animal or mishmash of animals combined together. And it's supposed to, I imagine it's sort of trying to visualize some of the culture that is embodied in her stories, because it's definitely that's part of the identity that she's exploring in these stories. It's all about, I think, her personal identity and exploring that in fictional, weird ways. But I could not tell you what it's actually trying to allude to. I just know it's gorgeous to look at, and it's just all comes together for a really beautiful cover, in my not so humble opinion. I don't know how long that was. I feel like it wasn't the best idea for a video, but I wanted something easy one day, not too heavy, and hopefully kind of quick. But these are my favorite covers. Let me know, of the books you read specifically, did you have a favorite cover? What was it? Let me know, because everyone loves a beautiful cover. It's honestly part of why I pick up some books. That's why I picked up 2 gorgeous covers in December. I wanted something pleasing. But as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all stay safe. And I'll see you all tomorrow on the next day of 13 days of Vlogmas. Okay, goodbye.